Hello, and welcome to Let's Make a Top-Down Shooter. This video is about allowing the player the option to select which character they want to play with when the game first launches. And a special thanks to all my supporters. Your support is what makes this worth doing. So from the respawn video, we found that we needed to add this init final functionality because when the player is created the first time, it goes in a certain order, and then when it's restarted, it kind of goes in the reverse order where begin play is being called first. So the end result there is that when you initially spawn a character through game mode's default pawn class, it will create the character and possessed by will be called because the controller possesses that character. And then at the end, begin play is called, which results in this code right here. So we get the player controller and the enhanced input mapping context is added to that enhanced input local player subsystem, and we're setting up our cursor stuff here. When restart player is called, begin play is called on that newly created character before the controller is attached, which means this code doesn't run the second time. Now, that didn't matter in that case because when it ran the first time and the context is being added to that subsystem, and the mouse stuff is being set up, we don't undo any of that. It's still in the system. Restart player works. However, if you don't use the default pawn class for the initial spawning of a character, and you spawn through restart player, which is the intent of this video, this will be invalid and not get called. So as a result of that, we need to take that out and put it into our init final. So the first thing we're going to do here is take our third person character and create a child. We're going to call this BP TPC for third person character, and we'll call this one Quinn. Just going to duplicate this, which will make a second child, and call this one Manny. I didn't need to capitalize that, but that's okay. All right, so for Quinn here, the default was already Quinn, so we can keep that. However, we do want to go into our mesh. We're going to go to our materials here, element 1. I'm going to click this one to browse to that. So that's right here. I'm going to copy this into, left click drag into my third person blueprints. You don't need to do this. I'm doing this because I want to keep all the files I edited in the archive that I saved for this project, which is available on Patreon. So that's copied in there. Once I have that copied, I can select it, go back in here, click this one to use the selected asset. Nothing changes. I open that up. I want to put on a tint, and we'll make this red. Save that, go back in here. You can see part of it was updated as red. You can see that part of the body is using this material and the other part was using the other material. We'll just leave it like that for now. In Manny, we'll do the same thing. Click on our mesh, go to our material 2, find it, make a copy. Do it. Oops. Oh, right, it was in the Manny folder. I didn't update that first. Silly. All right, first I wanted to update this to a Manny. This also to Manny. All right, now I can click on the mesh, click on go to folder, copy that one over. Get rid of this one. All right, this one we will tint blue. Maybe a little foreshadowing going on. Don't worry about it. There we go. So for these changes, the first thing we need to do is go into game instance. I'm going to make a new variable for default pawn class. This is a pawn class reference. So we type in pawn. We have to hover over it for a little bit to get this window to pop up and choose class reference. Next, I'm going to create a player controller. I'll call this BP player controller. Get reference to self so that I can call set input mode game in UI. Since we will not be starting directly with the character, and we'll be starting with this player controller only instead. We needed this again. We also need show mouse cursor. And then we're going to get the game instance, cast that to ours. We want to get the default pawn class. We're going to convert that to a validated get. Because if it has not already been set, we want to create and display a widget. So I can't create that yet. I have a function on click select character. This will be called from that widget, so we'll go and create that now. I saw there's an error, but that's okay, we'll get to it. Create a new widget blueprint, user widget. Call this WBP select character. In here, we simply have a canvas panel with an image to hide everything, a horizontal box for our button selection, a button with some text on it. I'll throw in a spacer. Call this Quinn button. Text will be Quinn. A Manny button with text Bob. Oh, did I put the spacer in the wrong spot? Let's drag that in there. Okay. We want our buttons to fill. They'll be large. Make this fill and small. The horizontal box we want centered. Hold Control Shift, throw in the center. Just make this quite large, 800 by 200 by 100. 600. All right, still ridiculously big, but not too bad. The image we want to stretch. Didn't hold Control and Shift there, so it didn't do the full thing. And then we'll just make this some dark color. All right, then we need to add our onClicked, which is on the button, not the text. Go back and do the same for Manny. So in here we want to get the player controller. Basically 0 is always the first character. So single player, all good. Cast that to our player controller so that we can call on click select character. Back in our player controller, we can save this as a variable, call this WPP, select character. And then we need to add to viewport. Make sure that red goes away. And then lastly in here, we also need a input parameter for the pawn class. As before, we just hold on that pawn reference or class reference so that in here we can choose Quinn and Manny. In here, we're getting our selected character. For sanity's sake, we'll do a validated get. Using that, we want to remove it from parent and then set that variable back to null. And then we're going to get our game instance. So we can cast that to ours. So that we can set the default pawn class based on the one we just sent in, which is pawn class. So we can do get pawn class here. And then we also need to get the game mode, set that default pawn class to the same thing. And then, as before, restart player. Sending along our controller. Lastly, in our game mode, first of all, the default pawn class is now going to be none. If there is no default pawn class and you start a game, it basically gives you the default, so nothing is happening here. I'm going to start or set our player controller class, the one we just created. If I start with that, you can see this stuff. However, in here we also want, actually let me show it like that first. So go in, click Quinn, and you can see, I mean it's a little hard to see, but you can see the red. So it's obviously Quinn. If I start and select Manny, there's the blue. So that's working. However, if I go to another level, it goes back to starting with the player controller, but because I put this stuff in the player controller, not that. This is only happening when it's invalid, and I didn't put similar in the game mode. Actually, what I really meant to show was not even using that functionality. If you go in here, oh right, I meant before saving it to the game instance, if you had done this, you get this pop-up, which is great. You go in here, you go to a new level, you get the pop-up again so you can switch characters. So that may be something you want in your design. However, we're not doing that, so I'll undo that, and then similarly in game mode, Under Begin Play, I want to get the default pawn class from here. That is also a validated get. So Begin Play on game mode is called every time you load a new level. If the game instance has saved the default pawn class from previously, we want to then set the default pawn class in our game mode and use that to call restart player. And then again in here, we can use get player controller with a 0 to get the local player or solo player. So now we start with Manny, we go to a new level, and it's still Manny automatically. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to see more, you know what to do. And if you would like to support this channel or just want to download the project files, you can do so through my Patreon linked below.